Well, hello there and welcome. You are listening to the Kindness Matters podcast, and I am your host, Mike Rathbun. What is this podcast all about? It's about kindness. It's a pushback against everything negative that we see in the news and on social media today, and it's a way to highlight people, organizations that are simply striving to make their little corner of the world a little better place. If you want to join in on the conversation, feel free. Go ahead and follow us on all of your social media feeds. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're even on LinkedIn under Mike Rathbun. Check us out. And in the meantime, so sit back, relax, enjoy, and we'll get into the Kindness Matters podcast. Hey, welcome everybody to the show. How are you today? I hope you're well. I have a fantastic guest for you, as always, because all of my guests are fantastic. My guest today is Pete Parton, and Pete, by any measure, has every reason to be an angry man. His life has not been kind to him for the most part, and yet, Pete is an incredibly kind individual who shines a light on everyone he meets. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Hey, thank you so much, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Because really, your biography really reads. I mean, you had a very. I should let you tell it. Your childhood was not a happy one.
Right. So, I'll just start at the very beginning, even before I was born. So, I come from a poor family. Dad was a mechanic, mom was a dietitian. They had, my sister 8 years before I was born, my brother 6 years before I was born. And after that, they were happy because it's like, we have a boy and a girl, we're done having kids. And so my mom actually made the decision to have a tubal ligation, have her tubes tied. And 6 years later, I was surprised.
Yeah.
So somebody wants me to be here anyway. But, that caused a tremendous financial strain to the family. And so my dad actually, he turned to alcohol and drinking, became abusive, and took it out of me a lot of times because I was the one that, brought that hardship.
In his eyes, you were the reason for the problems.
Right. Yes.
That's okay.
Even though I was just a kid,
right. That's so wrong.
Right. So, he became very abusive. There was several times that he actually attempted to take my life from me. I know one time, at 8 years old, I think, and he attacked me. He came home, attacked me with a baseball bat, which is why I have this scar on my head here.
Mm-hmm.
I passed out after the first hit. And
wow.
I swear to this day, I had angels watching over me because I don't know how I'm here after that.
Right.
There's another instance where he came upstairs. We had a 2-story house. He came upstairs and was just angry with me and just took me and threw me head over heels down the stairs. And somehow I left that without a single scratch.
Oh my gosh.
I had
no broken bones or anything, huh?
No broken bones, not even a bruise, which is crazy.
That is nuts.
But, it wasn't all dark because I had my grandfather and my grandparents, and there were times that he literally stepped in and saved my life. He came and took me out of that house. And not only that, he loved me. And he believed in me and eventually taught me to believe in myself, and gave me the greatest gift of all, which is my faith. And so, childhood was very difficult. There was that at home, and then going to school. Kids didn't understand. They didn't know what was going on in my house.
Sure.
So I was bullied a lot growing up too. So I had that going on as well. But fortunately, I had people in my life, like my grandfather. I had several teachers. Teachers, they don't get enough credit because they pour into our lives. And I was blessed in sixth grade, actually, to have a man that won the Indiana State Teacher of the Year twice.
Oh, wow.
And he really inspired me, and he believed in me also. And so I give him a lot of credit. I give my grandpa a lot of credit. I've always had help along the way
when you needed it the most.
Yes.
Wow. It's just so. I mean, just that start in life. Probably, I mean, nobody would blame you if you were just a angry young man. I mean, nobody. But you weren't. You went on. You moved on from there, right?
I did. Yes. And Mike, there were dark times. Certainly, there were times when I questioned my worth and my value, and questioned whether I even deserved to live. And my father, it wasn't just the physical abuse. I mean, yes, I had bruises, I had scars, but it was his words, I think, that were worse than anything. Telling me you're nothing, you're never going to amount to anything, you're a mistake, things like that. And that's difficult to overcome.
That's almost impossible to overcome. I think we really underestimate when we say to our children, that when we talk down to them like that, that stays forever, or for a long time, unless you're in therapy.
Right. Yeah. A long time to recover from that.
For sure.
So
go ahead.
Please, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that you ever completely recover from that. I know there are times when things go wrong. I still hear my father's words in my head. They're still there. But I've learned how to kind of not grasp on to those words and those feelings, and recognize them for what they are, their feelings, and let it go right on by, and focus on the positive things in life.
But that could be hard to do in your situation. I mean, it must be a real struggle to focus on the good things when there's all that other stuff floating around up there.
Yeah, certainly. It has not been an easy road, that's for sure.
Now, have you always been, you mentioned your school teacher. Is that where you learned your love of writing?
Actually, yes, interesting enough. It was in that sixth grade. There was an essay contest, and he encouraged me to enter it. And so I wrote this essay. It's 2 pages, and I actually won an award. I came in second place with the Fort Wayne newspapers. So that really is where my love of writing started, and it just evolved from there.
Because you can't. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I say it's been great because not only it's a great outlet, also, and if anyone out there is struggling, I encourage you to journal. Journaling is such a wonderful release and outlet for feelings. And when you go back and reflect over what you wrote, it kind of helps you understand and come to terms with everything that you've been through.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny because my last 3 episodes have all been about people who have come to terms with things in their life through journaling. So we're just continuing the theme here. How about art? Where did that love come from?
So I've always been interested in art. And honestly, and this is probably goes back to the words of my father. I was afraid to do it. I was afraid I wouldn't be any good at it. Well, the same holds true for writing as well. You know, if I wouldn't have had encouragement by my teacher, I probably never would have pursued it. But art was very much the same way. And for most of my life, and it was probably 5 years ago when I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to conquer my fears and I'm going to give it a try. And, you know, I found an outlet that just brings me such peace. You know, I was painting right before our podcast here
Oh,
to
nice.
fill the time. And, you know, it just, here's what I say. It's the one thing that when I'm doing it, I don't feel like it should be someplace else. Kind of all my worries just float away.
Nice. Yeah.
You know, but when I started, I was afraid I wouldn't be any good at it. So there is one holiday I was out doing Christmas shopping, and Michael's had, you know, a set that had an easel, a canvas, and some paints. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try it. So I got it. I came back, and I purposely have not, and I still haven't to this day, watched any videos or had any instruction on art. I wanted to learn from my own mistakes and learn how to make things better. But when I did that first painting, I thought it turned out horrible. And initially, I'm like, well, maybe my father was right. I suck at everything. So I took it, I threw it in the closet, and it sat there for 5 or 6 days. But there was something inside of me that nagged at me that made me want to try again. And so I kept at it, and, you know, I improved over time. And eventually I found something called pour painting or liquid art. And that's really my first love. But I think I've gotten better over time.
I was going to ask you what your favorite medium is.
Yeah,
because
pour painting.
What's that?
Definitely pour painting.
Nice. Because I used to watch Bob Ross.
Oh yes, Bob was.
And I so wanted to paint like Bob Ross, and I bought the oil paints. I sucked. I sucked big time. But I was in there with my little knife, you know, and making happy little trees. Yeah. I was never very good at it. Anyway.
You know, the one thing I've learned, Mike, is beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
That's very true.
I know that because I eventually featured that first work of art and let other people see it.
Yeah.
And I've had numerous people tell me that they think it's beautiful. You know, I still don't see it. That's okay. But it just, art is subjective, basically.
It is. It is. And what's the old quote? I don't know much about art, but I know what I like.
Right.
And, you know, everybody, you show it to 100 people, you're going to have 99 different takes on it. And that's okay. Yes. Right?
Beauty of art.
What's that?
That's the beauty of art.
Yeah. There's something for everyone. Yeah. Absolutely. So now you grew up and you were living your life. And then, as if you hadn't had enough setbacks in your life, you had a stroke.
Yes. So I've been, as my full-time job, I've been working in IT for 25 years. And, you know, last few years at my job had been particularly rough. But, you know, it led to a stroke. And, you know, I came into work one day like I normally would. Got in my car, was walking in, stopped to talk to some colleagues, and in the middle of a sentence, I couldn't talk. And the words were there, but they could not come out of my mouth no matter how hard I tried to make them. So, you know, I waited about 5 minutes, and then I just went on to my seat. You know, I was going to pretend that nothing happened, just go about my day. And then I picked up my mouse, and I kept dropping it. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Finally, I had a coworker turn around and looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I just shook my head no. He went and got the supervisor, got the safety guy, and they came, called an ambulance. By the time the ambulance got there, my right arm had gone completely numb.
Oh, wow.
So they rushed me to the hospital. And yeah, I had a blood clot in my brain, as it turns out. Ironically enough, and this, I think I say this is a miracle too, it required a very specific surgery, and there are only a few people in the state that can do the surgery. And one just happened to be at the hospital that day when I got there. So they got me in, had the clotbuster drug in me within an hour, and he took me into surgery immediately. And I think it helped minimize the impact. But
Wow.
impacts, as you know.
Yeah. What do they call that? The golden hour for strokes? If you get this, and this in this amount of time.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Clotbuster drug is very important to get it in as soon as possible. The longer it takes, the more effects that you have on your body. So,
Right.
yeah.
So were you able to? Well, obviously, that was a stupid question. I don't know why I started to ask it. Did you get your voice back? Ooh, I'm talking to you. I mean, so you did eventually recover.
Yes.
Were there any lasting effects?
Well, let me just say, after having the stroke, they intubated me. I was out for a day and a half. I woke up and somebody came and talked to me and said, "Do you know your name?" And all I could do was grunt. I couldn't talk at that point. So while I was in the hospital, they had speech therapists come work with me. And I ended up being in the hospital for just 6 days, which is miraculous in and of itself, because there's some people that are in there for 5 or 6 months after having a stroke.
Oh.
So after 6 days, they told me that it would probably and likely take a year or two to recover my voice, because I was going to have to learn to talk again, because it damaged the area of my brain that handles language.
Wow.
So, I would have the words, but again, my brain forgot how to talk. So I had to learn how to do that all over again. But when I left the hospital, they gave me exercises to work on. And the closest appointment I could get was 6 weeks out.
Oh.
But, when I went home, I thought to myself, 1-2 years. And keep in mind, up to this point, I wanted to be a motivational speaker. And so losing my voice was, a tremendous setback. It's the worst thing that could possibly happen to me.
Right.
So I basically said to myself, that doesn't work for me. A year or two does not work for me. So I took those exercises and I worked at it every single day. Very, very hard, very long, very hard hours doing that. But by the time I got to the 6-week appointment, they tested me. And I'll tell you a funny story about that in just a minute.
Okay.
But after they tested me, they said, well, basically there's nothing more we can do for you that you haven't already done for yourself.
Oh, wow.
Now, was I perfect at that point? No, definitely not. I still had hang-ups, but I had the basics back, right? And the funny story real quick was in the test, they have basically a series of pictures. There's a flip book. And they said, okay, just look at the picture and tell us what you see the best that you can. And so the first picture was of a house. And I think they were expecting me to say that's a house. But I said, it's a house, but I don't know what you want me to say. It's a Tudor, is it a colonial? And they laughed. And they're like, we never had
Oh my gosh. You gave them so much more than what they were expecting.
Exactly. Yeah. So initially, I had an issue whenever I would get upset or stressed, my brain would try to go back to that damage area and talk from there.
Yeah.
And so I would basically stutter or not be able to talk at all. if I was upset.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I was in a situation when I went back to work. Some people made me upset because I don't know if they thought it was funny to hear me stutter and whatever, but just further things, right?
They did that on purpose?
They did it on purpose, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. But, it is what it is. I've forgiven them.
Yeah.
As I've forgiven my father, I've forgiven everyone that's wronged me in my life, because
that could be a whole nother episode, because what it takes to forgive somebody who I don't, and I have a hard time with that, because I tend to hold on to stuff. Any negative thing that's ever been said to me, I can recall it, and I hold that in there, and I don't know, that can't be healthy.
Well, and the thing, that people get stuck on with forgiveness is, what the other person did. They get, to thinking about that. But forgiveness is not about the other person at all. It's not condoning what happened. It's not saying I accept it and am gonna let this person back in my life. No, it's not that at all. It's all about you. It's all about you letting go of the resentment, the bitterness, and the anger, and basically it frees you from all those emotions.
You're absolutely right. So you're all recovered, and you have a book, right?
I'm working on the book.
You're working on a book.
I do have a couple chapters in a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, who's also a motivational speaker. He has 2 books that he's let me write a chapter in. So he's blessed.
Nice.
Which has been wonderful. So my story's partially out there in his books. I am working on my story, though.
Awesome. But so your main motivation now is to be a motivational speaker. That's really what you want to do.
Yes. Well, I know there's a lot of people out there that are hurting and that have been through similar things to what I've been through, and I'm sure they feel hopeless. And so I want to do everything I can do to be that light for them, and to go sit with them in the darkness. I meet people where they are, and I sit with them in the dark without judgment, and I just am there for them, and I just want to be there for them. And I think motivational speaking is just a way to reach many people at once.
Yeah. So what are you lacking? Gigs?
What's that?
Speaking gigs?
Yeah, gigs definitely. I've been unemployed for over a year, and so financially, I'd love to travel. That would be my dream, is to travel around the country and even around the world and speak. However, right now I just don't financially have the resources to do that.
Sure. Yeah, because it's not cheap to do that. Your story is so amazing, Pete. I know you're a better man than I will ever be, but I think so many people would hear your story and feel a sense of hope, a sense that all is not lost, and would really benefit from hearing your story. I hope that this little podcast can maybe get that word out there. And I talked to some people who are speakers, so maybe we'll have to see if we can do something there for you. But at any rate, I appreciate the fact that you wanted to come on and share your story with me. I think my audience is going to absolutely eat this up. And I hope that, I always say, I don't need a million listeners. I just need one person who needs to hear that story that day.
Exactly. And that's kind of my philosophy too. And Mike, I just want to say, I think you're a pretty great individual yourself. So, don't put
Thank you.
yourself down. I think you're pretty.
Oh,
awesome.
no.
And I love your podcast, and that's why I wanted to be on it. Kindness matters. It does. It really matters. I know I've passed people on the street that I haven't seen in years, and they remember a kind act that I've done for them years ago. People remember.
Yes.
I had a guy. Another story, just real quick.
Go ahead.
I remember in high school, I was walking down the hall, and there was a gentleman walking the other way, and I could tell he was having a bad day, right? And I just smiled at him. I didn't even say anything. I smiled. His complexion changed. Years later, I ran into this guy, and he told me, I had no idea at the time. He told me that he was planning to take his life that night because things were so bad, but he didn't because of my smile. And so even the power of a smile, I'm telling you, it makes a difference.
It absolutely does. You have, and I got a new shirt. I don't know if you can see it. Be kind. Everybody is fighting a battle you know nothing about.
Absolutely, yes.
And you somewhere in this world, somebody is thinking about you, Pete Parton, because of something you did for them that was kind, and they'll remember you forever. And before I cry, I got to get off.
Yeah.
Pete, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And good luck to you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to get to know you. And it's just wonderful. And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Wow. Pete Parton, ladies and gentlemen, I have no words. The man has been through more than most of us have or will be going through, and yet he comes out on the other side smiling and wanting to be kind and forgiving. And I find his story so moving. I hope that you were able to take something from this episode, inspiration, motivation, what have you. And if you are booking for speakers, please get in touch with Pete. I'll have his information on the show notes. I think his story would be fantastic for any venue. So that will do it for this episode of the Kindness Matters podcast. We will be back again next week. Also, just a reminder that this show is a part of the Mayday Media Network. And if you are a podcaster or wanting to get into the podcast business, reach out to them. The link will be in the show notes as well. And they can help you become a great podcast. And you can join our little group here because we have a fantastic lineup of podcasts. We will be back again next week with another episode. But of course, until that time, be that person who roots for others, who tells a stranger that they look amazing, and encourages others to believe in themselves and their dreams. You've been listening to the Kindness Matters podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rathbun. Have a fantastic week.